The wildflowers appeared on her windowsill for the first time on a morning when frost still clung to the grass, and Vara thought at first that some bird had dropped them there by accident, until she saw how carefully they had been arranged in a small bundle tied with grass stems. She lived alone in a stone cottage at the edge of human territory, where the farmland gave way to the contested borderlands that neither orc clans nor human settlements could claim without bloodshed. Her people had cast her out 3 years ago for refusing to kill a human child she had found wandering lost in the woods, and the humans tolerated her presence only because she kept to herself and caused no trouble. She was an orc woman of 24 summers, with green skin that darkened to emerald across her shoulders and arms, small tusks that curved upward from her lower jaw, and pointed ears that caught every sound in the pre-dawn silence. Vara picked up the bundle with careful fingers, studying the varieties of wildflowers someone had gathered before the sun rose. There were bluebells and wild roses, early blooming primrose and delicate white bloodroot. Whoever had left them knew which flowers opened first in spring, which meant they knew the land well. She brought them inside to her small wooden table and untied the grass stem binding, spreading the flowers across the scarred surface. For reasons she could not fully explain, she opened the leather-bound journal she kept for pressing herbs and began to arrange the petals carefully between the pages, using the flat of her palm to smooth them into place. The journal had been a gift from the human merchant who sometimes sold her supplies, one of the few humans who would speak to her without fear or hatred in his eyes. The second bundle appeared 3 mornings later, this time with meadow rue and violet wood sorrel. Vara stood at her window in the gray light before sunrise, waiting to see if the giver would reveal themselves, but no one appeared on the path that led through the wild grasses to her door. She pressed those petals too, writing the date beside them in her careful script. The journal was filling with color, each page a record of someone's thoughtfulness that she could not understand. Orcs did not give flowers. Humans did not give gifts to orcs. Yet someone was leaving these bundles with a regularity that suggested intention rather than accident. On the 5th morning, she woke early enough to catch a glimpse of movement through the watery glass of her window. A man, human by his build and the way he moved, was placing something on the stone sill. He wore the rough clothes of a farmer, and even in the dim light she could see he was young, perhaps her own age. When he finished arranging the flowers, he stood for a moment looking at her door, then turned and walked quickly back down the path toward the human farms that lay a mile to the east. Vara remained perfectly still until he disappeared into the morning mist. Then she opened her door to find a bundle twice as large as the others, filled with flowers she recognized from the deep woods where few humans dared to venture. She should have been afraid. Men who approached orc women in secret usually came with knives or worse intentions. But there had been nothing threatening in his posture, no weapon visible at his belt. He had simply left flowers and walked away. And now Vara found herself thinking about him as she went through her daily routines of tending her small garden, checking her snares for rabbits, and hauling water from the stream. She wondered what he looked like in full daylight, wondered why he would risk the anger of his community to leave gifts for an orc. The next morning she woke even earlier and positioned herself where she could watch through a crack in her shutters. He came just as the sky began to lighten from black to deep blue, carrying the flowers in one hand. In the growing light, she could see more details. Hair the color of turned earth, broad shoulders, and a careful way of moving that suggested someone accustomed to not startling animals. He was handsome in the way human men could be, with a strong jaw and serious expression as he arranged the flowers. When he was satisfied with their placement, He touched 2 fingers to the stone sill in what might have been a gesture of respect or farewell, then left as silently as he had come. Vara pressed those petals with hands that trembled slightly, though she could not have said why. She had taught herself not to want things she could not have, not to imagine futures that would never exist for an outcast orc woman. But something about the persistent gentleness of those flower bundles was working its way past her defenses, making her wonder about possibilities she had locked away. 3 weeks passed in this pattern. He came, he left flowers, she pressed them into her journal. The pages were filling with color and fragrance, a record of someone's dedication that spoke louder than words. Vara found herself looking forward to the dawn, to that brief glimpse of him moving through the half-light. She learned the rhythm of his walk, the way he paused to study the flowers before laying them down, the gentle way his hands moved. Sometimes she caught herself touching the pressed petals in her journal, tracing their shapes as if they could tell her what his voice sounded like, what his hands felt like, what he wanted from her. On a morning when rain threatened, he came later than usual, and Vara made a decision that both frightened and exhilarated her. She opened her door just as he was turning to leave. He froze, and for a long moment they stared at each other across the threshold. Up close, she could see that his eyes were gray like storm clouds, and that he looked at her without the fear or disgust she had learned to expect from humans. "Thank you," Vara said, her voice rough from disuse. She spoke little these days, having no one to talk to. "For the flowers." He swallowed hard, and she saw his hands tighten briefly before he forced them to relax. "You are welcome," he said, and his voice was deeper than she had expected, warm and careful. "I hope they pleased you." "Why?" The question came out more bluntly than she intended, but she needed to know. "Why do you bring them?" He looked down at the flowers in his hand, the last bundle he had been about to place on her sill. "Because you live alone out here," he said slowly, as if working out the words as he spoke them. "Because I pass your cottage on my way to check my northern fields, and I thought you might like something beautiful. Because no one should be entirely without kindness." Vara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "You could be shunned for showing kindness to an orc." "I know." He met her eyes again, and she saw no hesitation there. "My name is Kieran Marlowe. I farm the land east of here along the creek." "Vara," she said, because it seemed only fair to offer her name in return. "No clan name anymore. They cast me out. I heard about that." Kieran took a small step closer, still maintaining a respectful distance. "You saved a child. My neighbor's child, actually. Thomas was 6 then, and he wandered off chasing a fox. His mother says an orc woman found him and led him back to the road where humans would find him safely. She told me which cottage you lived in. She was not afraid I would eat him." Vara could not keep the bitterness entirely from her voice. "She was afraid others would hurt you if they knew how close you lived," Kieran said quietly. "She asked me to keep watch, to make sure you were safe out here." That is how I started passing by. The flowers came later when I realized how alone you seemed. Rain began to fall, light drops at first but quickly growing heavier. Vara made another decision that felt both dangerous and necessary. "Come inside," she said, "before you are soaked through." Kieran hesitated only a moment before stepping through her doorway, and Vara closed the door behind him, sealing them both into the small, warm space of her cottage. He looked around with open curiosity, taking in her simple furnishings, the bundles of drying herbs hanging from the rafters, the fire burning low in the stone hearth. His gaze fell on the journal lying open on the table, revealing pages filled with pressed flowers. "You kept them," he said, wonder in his voice. "Every one." Vara moved to the table and touched the journal gently. I did not know what else to do with such gifts. They seemed too precious to let them simply wither. Kieran came to stand beside her, looking down at the careful arrangement of petals, the dates written in her neat hand. "This is better than I imagined," he said softly. "I hoped you liked them, but this is more than that. You honored them." "They were the first kindness anyone has shown me in 3 years," Vara said, and was horrified to feel her voice catch on the words. "Of course I honored them." He turned to face her fully, and they were standing close enough now that she could smell the rain on his clothes, the earth on his skin. 3 years is too long to be without kindness, Kieran said. Too long to be alone. "I am an orc," Vara said, forcing herself to voice the reality that stood between them. "You are human. There can be nothing between us but this, these small secret kindnesses." "Why?" Kieran asked, and the genuine confusion in his voice made her want to laugh or cry or both. "Who decides what can and cannot be?" "Everyone," Vara said. "Your people and mine, the world we live in. The world is wrong." He said it with such simple conviction that Vara felt something shift inside her chest, some long, frozen part of her beginning to thaw. "I have been watching you for months now, Vara. I have seen how gently you tend your garden, how you leave food out for the foxes, how carefully you move through the world. I have seen more goodness in you from a distance than I have seen in most people I know well. If the world says I should not care for you, then the world is wrong." Vara closed her eyes against the sudden sting of tears. She had not cried in so long that she had almost forgotten how. "You do not know me," she whispered. "Then let me know you." Kieran's hand moved as if to touch her arm, then stopped, hovering in the air between them. "Let me bring flowers and stay to talk. Let me be your friend, if nothing else. Please." She opened her eyes and found him looking at her with such open hope that she could not bear to refuse him. "Friends," she agreed, though the word felt insufficient for the complex tangle of feelings his presence stirred in her. "You can come when you wish, but carefully. I would not have you suffer for my sake." "Let me worry about that," Kieran said, and smiled for the first time, an expression that transformed his serious face into something bright and warm. "May I sit? The rain does not look likely to stop soon, and I would like to hear about these flowers if you will tell me. Where you found them, what you know of them." So Vara made tea from her herbs, and they sat at her small table with the journal open between them, and she told him about the properties of each flower, which ones could heal and which ones were merely beautiful. Kieran listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest, and the rain fell steadily outside while inside the cottage, a different kind of warmth began to grow. When he finally left, promising to return in 2 days, Vara stood at her window and watched him go with a feeling she recognized as dangerous. Hope. Kieran came back as promised, and then again, and again, until his visits became as regular as his flower deliveries had been. Sometimes he brought food from his farm, fresh eggs or vegetables, or a loaf of bread his neighbor had baked. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself and his willingness to talk or listen, or simply sit in comfortable silence, while Vara worked on her projects, and he mended whatever tools needed mending. He told her about his farm, about how he had inherited it from his father 2 years ago, and was still learning the rhythms of the land. She told him about growing up in an orc clan, about the rigid hierarchy and constant pressure to prove strength through violence, about how she had never quite fit into that world even before they cast her out. "You miss it?" Kieran asked one afternoon as they sat outside her cottage, watching clouds drift across the sky. Having a community, even if it was difficult, Vara considered the question carefully. "I miss belonging somewhere," she admitted. I miss knowing my place in the world, even if that place was often uncomfortable. But I do not miss the violence or the constant anger. Orc clans are always preparing for the next fight, the next raid, the next battle. I grew tired of it. What would you want instead? Kieran's voice was gentle, curious without being pushy. If you could have any kind of life. This, perhaps, Vara said, surprising herself with the honesty. A quiet cottage, a garden, useful work to do, peace. She glanced at him, feeling heat rise in her cheeks, and someone to share it with. But that is a foolish dream for an orc woman. I do not think it is foolish, Kieran said firmly. I think it is exactly what everyone deserves, regardless of what kind of skin they have or what shape their teeth are. Vara touched one of her tusks self-consciously. They were small compared to male orcs, but still prominent, still marking her as other. You say that now, but you have not seen how humans look at me when I go to the market, how they pull their children away and make signs against evil. Then they are fools, Kieran said with an edge of anger in his voice that was not directed at her. And I am sorry you have to endure that, but their fear and ignorance do not define your worth, Vara. They do not change who you are. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to lean into the warmth of his presence, to let herself imagine that his friendship could become something more. But she had learned to be cautious with her heart, and she kept a careful distance even as she treasured every moment they spent together. Spring deepened into early summer, and the flowers Kieran brought changed with the seasons. Wild strawberries and honeysuckle, black-eyed Susans and yarrow. Vara's journal was more than half full now, its pages a chronicle of changing seasons and steady devotion. She had started adding her own notes beside the pressed flowers, observations about the weather or things Kieran had said or small moments of happiness that she wanted to remember. The journal was becoming a record of something precious, something she had never expected to have. One evening when Kieran stayed later than usual, helping her repair a section of her roof that had started to leak, she made dinner for both of them. A simple stew with rabbit from her snares and vegetables from her garden. They ate outside as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Vara felt a contentment so deep it almost frightened her. This was what she had dreamed of in her most secret heart, this companionship and ease, but she had never imagined it could be real. "What are you thinking?" Kieran asked, watching her face in the fading light. "That I am happy," Vara said simply, "and that it scares me because happy things can be taken away." Kieran set down his bowl and turned to face her fully. "Vara, I need to tell you something, and I want you to truly hear me. I am not going anywhere. These past months with you have been the best of my life. I wake up thinking about when I will see you next. I go to sleep remembering things you said. You have become essential to me, do you understand? Not despite what you are, but because of everything you are." Vara's heart was beating too fast, hope and fear warring inside her chest. "Kieran, we cannot, why not?" He moved closer, his eyes intense in the twilight. "Give me one real reason why we cannot care for each other, why we cannot build something together. Not what others think or fear, but something true." "Because it will hurt," Vara whispered. "Because when they find out, when your people or mine decide to stop us, it will destroy me. I have been alone and outcast and I have survived it, but I could not survive losing you. Better to keep this as friendship, to protect what we have, than to reach for more and watch it burn." "You think friendship will hurt less?" Kieran asked gently. "You think if we put walls between us and call what we feel by a safer name, it will protect your heart? Mine is already lost, Vara. I am already in love with you, have been for weeks, maybe months. Calling it friendship does not change the truth." Vara stood abruptly, needing to move to breathe. "You should not love me," she said, hearing the shake in her voice. "I am not what you need." Kieran stood too, but he did not try to touch her, just spoke with quiet intensity. "You are exactly what I need. You are strong and kind and wise. You see the world clearly, but you have not let it make you cruel. You tend growing things with such care, and you press flowers into journals as if they are treasures, and you make me laugh with your dry observations about human foolishness. I love you, Vara. I love you, and I am not taking it back or pretending otherwise to make this easier." "It cannot work," Vara said, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. "It is already working," Kieran countered. "We are already something, whatever we call it. The question is whether we are brave enough to admit it and fight for it." Vara turned to look at him, this human man who had started leaving her flowers in the dark before dawn, who had somehow worked his way past every defense she had built. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I," Kieran said, "but I am more afraid of losing you by being too cowardly to try." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Vara thought about her journal full of pressed petals, about mornings waking to find beauty left on her windowsill, about afternoons spent in easy conversation and evenings sharing meals. She thought about how Kieran looked at her as if she was precious, how his presence had transformed her lonely cottage into something that felt almost like a home. "If we do this," she said slowly, "if we name what this is, there will be consequences. People will not accept it. They will try to stop us. Then we will face them together," Kieran said. "But Vara, I would rather face opposition with you than face safety without you. I would rather fight beside you than live peacefully pretending I do not love you." Something inside Vara broke open, some last resistance crumbling. She closed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed him, clumsy and fierce and full of all the longing she had been suppressing. Kieran made a sound of surprise and relief, his arms coming around her to pull her closer. He was warm and solid and real, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her want to cry. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for so long," he murmured. "I have been wanting you to," Vara admitted. "But I was afraid to want it." "No more fear," Kieran said. "Or at least no more letting fear make our decisions for us. We can be afraid and still choose this. Choose us." "Us," Vara repeated, testing the word. It felt fragile and powerful at once. "Yes, I choose us." They stood there in the gathering darkness, holding each other, and Vara felt something shift in the world around them. She had spent 3 years believing she would always be alone, always be outcast, and now this human man was offering her a future she had not dared to imagine. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The summer weeks that followed were the happiest of Vara's life, and also the most complicated. Kieran came to her cottage every day now, no longer hiding his visits or pretending they were anything other than what they were. He helped her tend her garden and repair her fence. She helped him harvest early crops and preserve foods for winter. They fell into patterns of domestic life that felt natural and right, cooking together and talking late into the evening, sharing a bed when Kieran stayed overnight and waking tangled together in the gray light of dawn. But the happiness existed in a bubble that could not last. One morning, a group of human men appeared on the path to Vara's cottage, their faces hard with suspicion and anger. Kieran was inside making breakfast, and Vara moved quickly to put herself between them and the door. "You need to leave," the leader said. He was an older man Vara recognized from the market, someone who had always been particularly vocal about the orc threat. "We have tolerated your presence here because you kept to yourself and caused no trouble. But if you are luring human men to your bed with orc magic, that tolerance ends." "There is no magic," Vara said, keeping her voice level though her heart was pounding. Only friendship and companionship freely given. An orc and a human cannot have companionship, another man spat. It is unnatural, evil. You will leave by tomorrow or we will burn you out. Kieran emerged from the cottage, his face set in lines of anger Vara had never seen before. You will do no such thing, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Vara has done nothing wrong. She has lived peacefully here for 3 years, harming no one, and she will continue to live here as long as she chooses. Kieran Marlowe, we respected your father, the older man said, but you are young and clearly being influenced by orc tricks. Step away from the creature and come back to your farm. We will deal with this situation. Her name is Vara, Kieran said, moving to stand beside her. And she is not a creature or a situation. She is a woman I care deeply about, and if you threaten her, you threaten me. Then you are both exiled, the man said flatly. Leave this territory by tomorrow or face the consequences. We will not have this perversion in our community. The men left, and Vara felt her brief happiness crumbling around her. You see, she said to Kieran, trying to keep her voice from shaking. This is what I feared. Now you will lose everything because of me. I am not losing anything that matters, Kieran said fiercely. My farm is just land, Vara. You are irreplaceable. Your farm is your livelihood, your future, your heritage from your father, Vara argued. I cannot ask you to give that up. You are not asking. I am choosing. Kieran took her hands in his. But we do need to decide what to do. We can leave together, find new land somewhere more accepting. Or we can stay and fight for our right to live as we choose. Vara closed her eyes, thinking hard. Running felt like admitting defeat, like accepting that the world was right to reject them. But staying could mean violence, could mean watching Kieran be hurt or killed for loving her. I do not know the right answer, she admitted. Then we will figure it out together, Kieran said. But Vara, whatever we decide, I am with you. That is the one thing that does not change. They spent the day discussing options, weighing risks, trying to find a path forward that did not require sacrificing everything. By evening they had reached a tentative decision. They would go to the town council and formally request permission to stay, to make their case that an orc and a human could live peacefully together without threatening anyone. It was a long shot, but it felt more honorable than fleeing in the night. The council meeting was held 3 days later in the largest building in the settlement, a wooden structure that served as both town hall and gathering place. Vara walked in with Kieran beside her, feeling every eye on her green skin and tusks, hearing the mutters of disapproval and fear. The council consisted of 5 elders, 3 men and 2 women, who sat at a raised table looking down at the assembled crowd. Kieran spoke first, his voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. Honored Council, I come before you to request permission for Vara to remain in her cottage and for our relationship to be recognized and accepted. She has lived peacefully among us for 3 years, breaking no laws and causing no harm. I ask that you judge her by her actions rather than her ancestry. One of the councilwomen, a sharp-faced woman named Margaret, leaned forward. And what exactly is this relationship you wish us to recognize, Kieran Marlowe? We are partners, Kieran said clearly. I love her and she loves me. We wish to build a life together, to farm the land and contribute to this community. We ask only for the same rights and respect given to any other couple. The murmurs grew louder, more agitated. The head counselor, a grizzled man named Thomas, raised his hand for silence. Miss Vara, is this true? Do you wish to bind yourself to this human man? Vara stepped forward, forcing herself to meet his eyes. It is true. I love Kieran. I would stand beside him as his partner and wife if the law allowed it. I would work to earn my place in this community, to prove that orcs and humans can live together in peace. The law does not allow it, Thomas said heavily. Marriage between species is forbidden, has been forbidden for generations, and for good reason. Such unions produce only grief and division. With respect, counselor, grief and division are what we have now, Vara said. Endless cycles of fear and violence between our peoples. Someone must be willing to break that cycle, to show that another way is possible. Pretty words, Margaret said coldly, but you are still an orc. Your people raid our farms, kill our livestock, attack our children. How can we trust you not to do the same? I was cast out of my clan for refusing to harm a human child, Vara said. I gave up everything I knew to protect a 6-year-old boy I found lost in the woods. I have lived alone and shunned rather than participate in violence. What more proof can I offer? Another counselor, a younger man named Peter, spoke up. I was that child, he said, and the room went quiet. I am Thomas's son. I remember that day, remember being lost and terrified. An orc woman found me, gave me water, and led me to the road where I would be safe. She could have killed me or taken me hostage or done any number of terrible things, but she chose mercy. I support Vara's request to stay. Thomas looked at his son with an expression Vara could not quite read. You never told me it was her, he said quietly. I told you an orc saved me and you did not want to hear it, Peter said. You wanted to believe all orcs were monsters, but they are not, father. Vara is proof of that. The council conferred in whispers for several long minutes while Vara and Kieran waited, hands clasped tightly together. Finally, Thomas spoke again. We cannot officially recognize your union, he said. The law is clear on that point. But we will not force you to leave, provided you continue to live peacefully. You may remain in your cottage, Vara, and Kieran may visit you as he chooses. We will not interfere, but neither will we defend you if others choose to cause trouble. You will be on your own. It was not everything they had hoped for, but it was more than Vara had expected. Thank you, she said, bowing her head respectfully. We will cause no trouble. You have my word. They left the meeting hall in silence, aware of the stares that followed them. When they were finally alone on the path back to Vara's cottage, Kieran let out a long breath. That could have gone worse, he said. It could have gone better, Vara countered. We are still not safe. They will not protect us if others attack. Then we will protect each other, Kieran said firmly. And we will prove them wrong about us, Vara. We will show them that love between an orc and a human is not a threat but a bridge. Vara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that things could work out. But she had lived too long on the edges of both worlds to be truly optimistic. She pressed the flowers Kieran brought her and tried to hold onto the happiness they had found, knowing it might not last. The trouble came a month later, on a night when Kieran was staying at his farm to deal with a sick cow. Vara woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of angry voices outside her cottage. She grabbed her knife and moved to the window, seeing torches in the darkness, seeing at least a dozen men gathered on her small patch of land. Come out, orc, someone shouted. Come out and face justice for corrupting one of our own. Vara's mind raced through options. She could run, try to escape into the woods, but they would probably burn her cottage either way. She could fight, but she was one against many, and killing humans would only prove their worst beliefs about her. She could surrender and hope they would be satisfied with driving her away rather than killing her, but that felt like a weak hope. She chose defiance. Vara opened her door and stepped out, knife visible in her hand but held at her side, not threatening. I have committed no crime, she said loudly. The council granted me permission to stay. You have no right to drive me out. The council does not speak for all of us, the leader said, and Vara recognized him as one of the men who had confronted her before. We will not allow an orc to bewitch our young men and corrupt our community. You leave tonight, or you burn with your cottage." "Then I will burn," Vara said, lifting her chin. "Because I will not run from cowards who come in the night with torches, because they are too afraid to face their own ignorance." The man's face twisted with rage. "Burn it," he ordered, and several men moved forward with their torches raised. The sound of hoofbeats made everyone freeze. Kieran came riding hard up the path, his horse lathered with sweat. He threw himself from the saddle and ran to stand beside Vara. "Stop," he shouted. "Stop this madness now." "Go home, Kieran," the leader said. "This is not your concern anymore. The orc will be gone and you can return to your proper place." "My proper place is beside her," Kieran said. "And if you burn her cottage, you will burn me with it because I am not leaving." "Do not be a fool, boy. I am not a boy. And I am not a fool," Kieran interrupted, his voice ringing with authority. "I am a landowner and a member of this community, and I am telling you that if you harm Vara, you will answer to me and to the council and to every law we have. She has done nothing wrong. She has broken no laws. You are the ones threatening violence against an innocent woman, and that makes you the criminals here, not her." Some of the men shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain. The leader's face remained hard. "She has bewitched you, made you turn against your own kind. She has loved me," Kieran said, his voice softening. "She has shown me kindness and companionship and opened my eyes to the foolishness of hating people because of how they look. And yes, that has changed me, but not through magic. Through the simple power of seeing clearly. You are afraid of orcs because you have never known one as a person, but I have. And I am telling you that your fear is unfounded." A woman's voice called out from the back of the crowd. "Let them be." It was Margaret from the council, emerging from the darkness with several other townspeople behind her. "Peter told me what was being planned, and I came to stop it. The council has ruled. Vara may stay. If you proceed with this violence, you will be the ones exiled, not them." The standoff lasted several long, tense moments. Then, one by one, the men began to lower their torches and step back. The leader spat on the ground but turned away, and the crowd began to disperse into the night, leaving Vara and Kieran standing in front of her cottage with Margaret and a handful of others. "Thank you," Vara said to Margaret, her voice rough with emotion. "Do not thank me yet," Margaret said briskly. "I did not do this for you. I did it because we are supposed to be better than our worst impulses, and mob violence against a lone woman is shameful regardless of her race. But this is not over. There will be others who oppose you, others who try to drive you out. You need to be prepared for that." "We will be," Kieran said, his arm around Vara's shoulders. "Thank you for upholding the council's decision." Margaret nodded and left with her supporters, leaving Kieran and Vara alone in the darkness. Vara was shaking now, the fear she had suppressed during the confrontation catching up with her. Kieran guided her inside and held her while she trembled, murmuring reassurances she barely heard. "You should not have come," she said when she could speak again. "You could have been hurt." "So could you," Kieran said. "Did you really think I would let you face that alone? I thought you were at your farm with the sick cow. Peter came and told me what was happening. I rode as fast as I could." Kieran pulled back to look at her face. "Vara, we cannot keep living like this, always waiting for the next attack. We need to find a better solution." "There is no better solution," Vara said wearily. "We can leave or we can stay and fight. Those are the only options." "What if there was a third option?" Kieran said slowly. "What if we could create a place where we would not have to fight, where others like us could come and live without fear?" Vara frowned. "What do you mean?" "My farm borders the wild lands," Kieran said, thinking out loud. "What if we expanded into that territory, built a settlement that welcomed both orcs and humans, a place founded on the idea that the two races can live together peacefully. It would be hard work and dangerous at first, but if we could make it work, we would be creating a target, Vara said. A place for both sides to attack, or a place for both sides to see that peace is possible, Kieran countered. I know it is a risk, but is not everything worth having a risk? Vara thought about it, turning the idea over in her mind. It was audacious and probably foolish, but it also stirred something in her chest, something that felt like hope. We would need others willing to join us, she said. Humans and orcs both. We cannot build a community alone. Then we will find them, Kieran said. There must be others who are tired of the fighting, who want something different. We will find them, and we will build something new together. Over the following weeks, they began to quietly spread word of their plan. Kieran talked to the humans he trusted, those who had shown sympathy or at least tolerance for his relationship with Vara. Vara made a dangerous journey to the borders of orc territory and left messages in the places she knew outcast orcs sometimes sheltered, offering a chance to join a new kind of community. The responses were slow but steady. A young human couple who had spoken in their defense at the council meeting came first, offering to help clear land and build structures. Then, an older orc woman who had been widowed and cast out when she could no longer fight arrived with her 2 adolescent grandchildren. A human man who had lost his family to an orc raid came, saying he was tired of hatred and wanted to try forgiveness. More followed, a trickle at first and then a small but steady stream of people willing to take a chance on something different. By autumn, they had the beginnings of a real settlement. 12 structures stood in a clearing at the edge of Kieran's farmland, simple cabins built with shared labor and determination. Humans and orcs worked side by side, learning each other's languages and customs, navigating misunderstandings with varying degrees of success. It was messy and complicated and often frustrating, but it was also something unprecedented. A place where the two races lived together by choice rather than conflict. Vara found herself becoming one of the settlement's informal leaders, her experience living between both worlds making her uniquely suited to mediate disputes and facilitate understanding. Kieran managed the agricultural aspects, teaching both humans and orcs his farming techniques and learning from the orcs' knowledge of wild plants and sustainable hunting. Together they created something neither could have built alone. Winter came, and with it new challenges. Food was scarce, and tempers ran short in the close quarters of snowbound cabins. One particularly bitter night, a fight broke out between a young human man and an orc youth over accusations of stolen supplies. Vara stepped between them before it could turn violent, her voice cutting through the anger. "Enough," she said firmly. "We did not come here to repeat the same patterns that failed us before. We came here to build something better, and that means learning to resolve conflicts without violence. Sit down, both of you, and we will find the truth of what happened." It turned out to be a simple misunderstanding. The supplies had been moved to a different storage area and not properly communicated. But the incident highlighted the fragility of what they were building, how easily fear and old prejudices could undermine their work. That night, Vara and Kieran called a gathering of everyone in the settlement. "We need to establish real rules," Kieran said to the assembled group. "Not just informal agreements, but actual laws that everyone agrees to follow. Ways to resolve disputes fairly and ways to punish those who break our agreements. We need shared traditions too," the old orc woman, whose name was Grisha, added. "Ways to celebrate together, to build bonds beyond just working side by side. My people have festivals, Your people have festivals. We should create new ones that belong to all of us." They spent the long winter evenings creating the framework of their new society, debating and compromising and slowly building consensus. It was hard work, requiring everyone to give up some of their own cultural expectations in favor of creating something new. But by the time spring returned, they had a charter written in both human and orcish languages, a set of laws and customs that everyone had agreed to uphold. The settlement also needed a name. After much discussion, they settled on Bridgewood, for the idea that they were building a bridge between two peoples. It was perhaps too optimistic a name, but Vara found she liked it. Hope was something worth claiming, even if it felt fragile. Spring brought new arrivals, more outcasts and idealists willing to try life in Bridgewood. The settlement expanded, and with it came new complications. Some nearby orc clans saw Bridgewood as a threat, a place where their members might defect to softer lives. Some human settlements saw it as a dangerous precedent that might encourage more mixing between races. Tensions rose on both sides. The crisis came on a warm day in late spring, when a delegation from Vara's former clan arrived at the edge of Bridgewood. They were led by her older brother, a massive orc warrior named Throck who had always embodied everything their clan valued: strength, aggression, loyalty to orc dominance. Vara went to meet them with Kieran at her side, her heart pounding. "Sister," Throck said, the word not quite mocking but not kind either. "We have heard strange tales of this place you have built, a place where orcs live with humans as equals rather than conquerors or conquered. We came to see if such madness was real." "It is real," Vara said, keeping her voice steady. "And it is working. We have built a community where both races prosper together." Throck looked around at the settlement, at the mixed groups working in the fields and building new structures. His expression was hard to read. "You always were soft," he said finally. "Even as a child, you preferred healing to fighting, growing things to destroying them. The clan was right to cast you out. You were never truly one of us." The word stung, even though Vara had known them to be true for years. "Perhaps not," she agreed. "But I have found a place where my ways are valued, where strength is measured in more than just violence. You could join us, Throck, you and any others from the clan who are tired of the endless fighting." Throck laughed, a harsh sound. "Join you, live alongside humans as if we are the same? Never. I came only to see this foolishness with my own eyes, and to warn you. The clan will not tolerate this settlement much longer. You are too close to our territory, offering our young ones an alternative to the true orc way. We will destroy this place unless you disband it and send the orcs home." "These orcs are home," Kieran said, speaking for the first time. "This is their settlement as much as it is ours. We will not disband it because of threats." "You are the human who has bewitched my sister," Throck said, focusing on Kieran with sudden intensity. "You are the reason she has forgotten her true nature and embraced this weakness." "I am the human who loves your sister," Kieran said calmly, "and she has not forgotten her nature. She has chosen a different path, one that takes more courage than simply following the clan's expectations." Throck's hand went to his weapon and Vara stepped between him and Kieran. "Brother, please, do not make this a fight. Look at what we have built here. Humans and orcs working together, living together, proving that our peoples do not have to be enemies. This could be the beginning of real peace." "Peace is for the weak," Throck said, but there was something in his eyes, some flicker of uncertainty. "Orcs are strong. We do not need humans except as enemies to test ourselves against." "And how many orcs die in those tests?" Vara challenged. "How many lose limbs or lives in pointless raids and battles? How much stronger could we be if we spent that energy building instead of destroying?" Throck was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with ideas that challenged everything he had been raised to believe. Finally, he stepped back. "I will take your words to the clan leaders," he said gruffly. "But do not expect mercy, sister. What you are doing here is blasphemy against the old ways, and blasphemy must be punished." He left with his warriors, and Vara felt Kieran's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "That could have gone worse," he said quietly. "It could have gone better," Vara replied, echoing their conversation from months ago. "They will attack us, Kieran. We need to prepare." They called the settlement together and explained the situation. Some wanted to flee immediately, to abandon Bridgewood before the fighting started. Others wanted to prepare for battle, to defend what they had built. Vara listened to all the arguments before speaking. "We will not abandon this place," she said firmly. "We have worked too hard and come too far. But neither will we meet violence with violence if we can avoid it. We will build defenses, yes, and prepare to protect ourselves if necessary. But our first approach will be to appeal to the orc clans through reason and example. We will show them that our way works, that it offers something their way does not." "They will not listen to reason," Grisha said. "I know the clans. They respect only strength." "Then we will show them a different kind of strength," Vara said. "The strength it takes to build instead of destroy. The strength it takes to change when change is needed. The strength it takes to love those who are different from us." Over the next weeks, they fortified Bridgewood as best they could while also redoubling their efforts to demonstrate the settlement's success. They invited delegations from nearby human and orc communities to come and see what they had built, to witness humans and orcs living together peacefully. Some came out of curiosity, others out of skepticism, but all went away with something to think about. The attack, when it came, was not the overwhelming force Vara had feared. A smaller group of young orc warriors, perhaps 15 in number, approached Bridgewood with weapons drawn. But they were met not by opposing fighters but by Vara and the other orcs of the settlement, standing unarmed at the boundary. "Why do you come here with weapons?" Vara called out. "We are no threat to you." "You are a threat to everything our people stand for," one of the young warriors shouted back. "You teach weakness and acceptance of humans as equals. You must be stopped." "Come into the settlement," Vara said, making a gamble. "Come see what we have built before you try to destroy it. If you still wish to attack after you have seen the truth of this place, we will not stop you. But give us one day to show you what we are." The warriors hesitated, clearly not expecting this response. Finally, their leader, a young orc woman about Vara's age, agreed. "One day," she said. "Then we will decide." They allowed the warriors into Bridgewood, and Vara made sure they saw everything. The fields where humans and orcs worked together to grow food, the workshops where they shared skills and knowledge, the communal dining hall where they ate together and told stories. She introduced them to the children, both human and orc, who played together without the hatred their parents had been raised with. She showed them the school where both races learned to read and write in each other's languages. Most importantly, she showed them the joy. The genuine laughter and friendship, the easy way people of both races helped each other, the small kindnesses that had become woven into the fabric of daily life. It was not perfect, there were still misunderstandings and conflicts, but it was real, and it was working. The young orc leader sought out Vara at the end of the day. "This is not what I expected," she admitted. "I thought I would find humans oppressing orcs or using magic to control them, but this seems genuine." "It is genuine," Vara said. "We have built something new here, something that honors the strengths of both our peoples. You could join us if you wished. There is room for all who truly want peace." The warrior shook her head. "I cannot. I have given my oath to the clan, but I will not attack you. And I will tell others what I have seen here. Perhaps some will listen. It was not total victory, but it felt like progress. The warriors left peacefully, and while Vara knew the threat was not entirely gone, she felt they had won something important. The chance to prove their way could work, even to those raised to hate it. Summer brought more growth to Bridgewood. The harvest was good, and they had surplus to trade with neighboring settlements, both human and orc. Some of those trades led to new relationships, new possibilities for cooperation. A human merchant began including Bridgewood in his regular route. An orc clan that lived further north sent a delegation to learn their methods of preserving food. Vara's journal was completely full now, every page pressed with flowers Kieran had given her over the past year and a half. She started a second journal, and Kieran teased her gently about needing a third at the rate he brought her flowers. But he never stopped leaving them on her windowsill at dawn, even though they now shared a home and he could simply hand them to her. The ritual had become sacred to both of them, a daily reminder of how their love had begun. One morning in early autumn, Kieran did not leave flowers on the windowsill. Instead, he woke Vara before dawn and led her outside to where he had created something extraordinary. A garden of wildflowers arranged in a heart shape, with a path leading to the center where a small wooden box sat waiting. "What is this?" Vara asked, her voice soft with wonder. "Open the box," Kieran said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. Inside was a ring, simple but beautifully made, with a green stone set in the band. "Kieran, I know we cannot marry legally," he said, taking her hands in his. "I know the human laws and the orc traditions do not recognize what we are to each other. But I want to marry you anyway, Vara. I want to stand before our community and pledge my life to yours. I want everyone to know that you are my partner, my love, my everything. Will you marry me?" Vara felt tears streaming down her face, happy tears for the first time in her life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They held the wedding a month later on a clear autumn day when the leaves were just beginning to turn gold. Everyone in Bridgewood attended, and even some people from neighboring settlements came to witness this unprecedented event. There was no priest or official to conduct the ceremony, so Vara and Kieran had written their own vows, drawing from both human and orc traditions to create something new. They stood facing each other in the center of the settlement, holding hands while Grisha and Margaret, representing both communities, spoke words of blessing and support. Then it was time for the vows themselves. "Vara," Kieran said, his voice strong and clear, "I pledge to you my strength in times of weakness, my hope in times of despair, my love in all times. I will stand beside you as partner and equal. I will honor your culture as you honor mine. I will defend our home and our community. I will bring you flowers every dawn for all the dawns we have together. This I swear, before these witnesses and before whatever gods may listen." Vara took a breath, steadying herself. "Kieran, I pledge to you my strength in times of weakness, my wisdom in times of confusion, my love in all times. I will stand beside you as partner and equal. I will honor your culture as you honor mine. I will tend our home and our community. I will press every petal you bring me and treasure them as I treasure you. This I swear, before these witnesses and before whatever gods may listen." They exchanged rings, and when they kissed, the assembled crowd cheered. Human voices and orcish voices raised together in celebration. It was a sound Vara had never expected to hear, a sound that made her believe that maybe, just maybe, they were building something that would last. The celebration continued late into the night, with food and music and dancing. Humans taught orcs their traditional dances, and orcs taught humans theirs. Children ran wild with joy, and even the most skeptical settlers seemed to relax into the happiness of the occasion. Vara danced with Kieran, with Grisha, with people she had come to know and care for over the past year. She felt part of something larger than herself, part of a community that had chosen to exist despite all the forces that said it should not. Late in the evening, when most people had gone to their homes, Vara and Kieran sat together outside their cottage, looking up at the stars. "We did it," Kieran said softly. "We actually did it." "We are doing it," Vara corrected. "This is not an ending, only a beginning. There will be more challenges, more people who try to destroy what we have built." "I know," Kieran said, "but we have proven it can be done. We have shown that love between our peoples is possible, that communities like this can exist. Whatever comes next, we have already won something important." Vara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Tell me what you imagine for the future," she said. "What do you see when you look ahead?" "I see Bridgewood growing," Kieran said thoughtfully. "More settlements like ours, scattered across the borderlands. Trade routes connecting them. Children growing up who do not even understand why their parents' generation fought. I see a future where what we have is not unusual but normal, where humans and orcs live together as naturally as they now live apart." "That is a beautiful dream," Vara said. "I hope we live to see it." "Even if we do not, we have started it," Kieran said. "And that is enough. We have loved each other across every barrier meant to keep us apart. We have built a home and a community. We have lived proof that the old hatreds do not have to continue forever. That is more than I ever imagined possible when I first started leaving flowers on your windowsill." Vara smiled, remembering that first morning when she had found the small bundle and thought it was an accident. So much had grown from that simple gesture of kindness. "I am glad you left those flowers," she said. "I am glad I pressed them into my journal. I am glad for every moment that led us here." "So am I," Kieran said and kissed her gently. "So am I." Winter came again to Bridgewood, and with it a new challenge. Vara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. No one knew what a child of mixed heritage would be like, whether it would be healthy or what characteristics it would inherit from each parent. The pregnancy itself might be dangerous. Orc women were built differently than human women. And though Vara was smaller than most orcs, she was still significantly larger and stronger than a human woman. Kieran insisted on bringing in both a human midwife and an orc healer to attend Vara through the pregnancy. The two women initially eyed each other with suspicion, but as the months passed and they worked together to keep Vara healthy, they developed a mutual respect that became friendship. It was another small example of what Bridgewood was meant to be. People working together across difference to achieve something neither could do alone. The pregnancy was difficult, but not impossibly so. Vara's body ached in new ways, and there were moments when she feared for both herself and the child. But Kieran was there every step of the way, bringing her flowers even when she was too sick to appreciate them, reading to her from books when she was too tired to move, simply holding her hand through the long nights when worry kept her awake. Spring arrived, and with it the time for the baby to be born. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Vara thought she might not survive it. But the midwife and healer worked together seamlessly, combining human medical knowledge with orc healing techniques. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, Vara heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "A daughter," the midwife said, placing the infant in Vara's arms. Small but healthy. Vara looked down at the tiny being in her arms and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. The baby had her green skin but a lighter shade, more like spring grass than emerald. Her ears were pointed but smaller than a full orc's. She had Kieran's gray eyes and what might become Vara's small tusks, though it was too early to tell. She was perfect, a living symbol of everything Bridgewood stood for. "She is beautiful," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is absolutely beautiful. What should we name her?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but had not settled on anything, wanting to see the child before deciding. Now Vara looked at her daughter and knew immediately what her name should be. "Dawn," she said. "We will call her Dawn for the beginning of something new." Little Dawn became the heart of Bridgewood in ways her parents had not anticipated. People from both communities doted on her, bringing gifts and offering help. She was the first child born in the settlement to parents of different races, and everyone felt invested in her success. The children who had been born human or orc now had a friend who was both and neither, who embodied the possibility of a future where such distinctions mattered less. As Dawn grew from infant to toddler, Vara continued to press the flowers Kieran brought each morning. The second journal filled, and then a third began. Each pressed petal was a day of their life together, a moment of beauty preserved. Vara sometimes paged through the journals with Dawn on her lap, telling her daughter the stories of how she and Kieran had met, how Bridgewood had been founded, how love had conquered fear. When Dawn was 3 years old, something remarkable happened. Throck returned to Bridgewood, this time without warriors, bringing instead his wife and 2 children. "The clan has exiled me," he told Vara bluntly. "I spoke too often of what I saw here, questioned the old ways too much. They said I was corrupted by your influence and cast me out." "I am sorry," Vara said, and meant it. Despite their complicated history, Throck shrugged, a gesture that did not quite hide his pain. "Perhaps they were right. Perhaps I was corrupted, or perhaps I simply finally saw clearly." "May we join your settlement, sister? We have nowhere else to go." "You may," Vara said, embracing him. "Welcome home, brother." Throck's family settled into Bridgewood and slowly adjusted to life there. It was not easy for him. He had spent his entire life valuing strength and dominance, and learning to value cooperation and compassion, instead, required remaking himself from the ground up. But he tried, and his children thrived in the environment, playing with Dawn and the other children without the prejudices their father had carried. Years passed. Bridgewood grew from a single settlement to a network of communities scattered across the borderlands. The model they had pioneered spread slowly but steadily, proving that humans and orcs could live together peacefully and prosperously. There was still opposition, still those on both sides who clung to the old hatreds, but they were becoming outnumbered by those who wanted something different. Vara and Kieran grew older together, their love deepening with time and shared experience. They had 2 more children after Dawn, a son who looked more human than orc and another daughter who looked more orc than human. Each child was unique. Each was loved. Each represented another victory over those who said such families should not exist. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Vara by taking her to the place where they had first met, the small stone cottage at the edge of human territory where she had lived alone for 3 years. The cottage still stood, though it was weathered and worn now, no longer inhabited since they had moved to Bridgewood. But the windowsill was still there, the place where Kieran had left so many bundles of flowers in the dawn light. "I wanted to come back here," Kieran said, "to remember how we started, to honor the place where everything began." Vara looked at the cottage and felt a rush of emotion. She remembered the loneliness of those years, the careful numbness she had cultivated to survive rejection from both her peoples. And she remembered the first morning she had found flowers on that sill, the small crack in her armor that had let hope seep in. "I was so alone," she said softly. "I had convinced myself that being alone was safety, that wanting connection would only lead to pain. And then you started leaving flowers, and you would not let me stay in that loneliness." "I could not," Kieran said. "I saw you out here alone, and it seemed wrong, seemed like something I should do something about. I did not plan to fall in love with you, Vara. I just wanted to bring you something beautiful. But bringing you flowers led to knowing you, and knowing you led to loving you, and loving you led to everything we have built. Such large consequences from such a small gesture," Vara mused. "Who would have thought wildflowers could change the world?" "They did not change the world," Kieran said. "We did. The flowers were just the beginning. We changed the world by refusing to accept that love was impossible, by building when everyone said we should destroy, by creating community where everyone said only conflict could exist." Vara pulled out her current journal. She was on the 7th one now, each filled with pressed petals and memories. "I have saved every flower you ever brought me," she said. "Every single one. These journals are a record of our life together, proof that what we have is real and lasting." Kieran opened one of the earlier journals, looking at the faded petals from a decade ago. "I will bring you flowers every morning for the rest of my life," he promised. "And you can press them all, fill 100 journals if you wish. Each one a day we loved each other, a day we chose each other despite everyone who said we should not." They stood together in front of the old cottage, holding hands as the sun rose, and Vara felt the completeness of her happiness. She had gone from exile and loneliness to love and community. She had children who would grow up in a world slowly learning that the old divisions did not have to be permanent. She had proven, along with Kieran and everyone else in Bridgewood, that a different way was possible. Years continued to pass. Dawn grew into a young woman who became a leader in Bridgewood, taking the principles her parents had established and expanding them further. She helped establish formal diplomatic relations between Bridgewood and both human and orc communities, creating trading agreements and mutual defense pacts. She married a young human man who had grown up in Bridgewood, and their wedding was attended by hundreds of people from dozens of settlements. Vara and Kieran became elders, respected and beloved in their community. They watched as the world slowly changed around them, as more mixed communities formed, as the idea of humans and orcs living together peacefully became less radical and more accepted. It was slow change, painfully slow sometimes, but it was real and it was lasting. On the morning of their 25th wedding anniversary, Kieran was too ill to rise before dawn. He had been growing weaker for months, his strength fading despite the best efforts of healers both human and orc. Vara sat beside his bed, holding his hand as the sky lightened outside their window. "I cannot bring you flowers this morning," Kieran said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry." "You have brought me flowers for 25 years, Vara said, fighting back tears. "For over 9,000 mornings, you have nothing to apologize for." "I wanted to make it to 10,000, Kieran said with a weak smile. "That seemed like a good round number." "The number does not matter," Vara said. "What matters is that you kept your promise. You brought me flowers and you loved me and you built a life with me that I never imagined I could have. You gave me everything, Kieran." "We gave each other everything," Kieran corrected gently. "I was just a farmer before you, Vara, alone on my land, going through the motions of living. You made me see that there was more to life than just existing. You taught me that love could cross any boundary, that building was better than destroying, that hope was stronger than fear. You gave me purpose and family and a legacy I am proud of." Dawn entered the room quietly, bringing her father water and checking his condition with the practiced eye of someone who had inherited her mother's healing knowledge. "How are you feeling, Papa?" she asked. "Tired," Kieran admitted. "But happy. I have lived a good life, Dawn. The best life." I want you to remember that. Dawn's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I will remember. We all will. Kieran died that afternoon peacefully with Vara holding one hand and Dawn holding the other. His passing was mourned by everyone in Bridgewood and the surrounding settlements, hundreds of people coming to pay their respects to the man who had helped change their world. They buried him in the garden he and Vara had tended together, and Vara planted wildflowers over his grave, every variety he had ever brought her. Grief was a heavy weight, but Vara carried it because she had to, because she had children and grandchildren who needed her, because Bridgewood needed her. She continued the work she and Kieran had started, continued to mediate disputes and welcome newcomers, and demonstrate that a better way was possible. But every morning, she went to her journals and ran her fingers over the pressed petals, remembering. On what would have been their 30th wedding anniversary, Vara woke to find wildflowers on her windowsill. She gasped, momentarily thinking it was impossible, that Kieran had somehow returned. But when she opened her door, she found Dawn standing there with tears on her face. I thought you should have flowers this morning, Dawn said. I thought Papa would want you to have flowers. Vara pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. From that day forward, someone in the family always left flowers on Vara's windowsill at dawn. Dawn or one of Vara's other children, or later her grandchildren. They maintained the tradition that Kieran had started, ensuring that Vara never woke to an empty sill. And Vara pressed each flower into her journals, which continued to fill with petals and memories. Vara lived for 15 more years after Kieran died, long enough to see Bridgewood grow from a network of settlements to a recognized territory with its own government and laws. Long enough to see mixed-race marriages become common rather than controversial. Long enough to see her great-grandchildren born into a world that was kinder and more accepting than the one she had known in her youth. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, with her collection of journals nearby. At her funeral, Dawn spoke about her mother's legacy. My mother was cast out of her clan for showing mercy to a human child, she said to the assembled crowd. She lived alone and rejected for years, but she never let that make her bitter or cruel. When a human man started leaving her flowers, she did not turn him away. She let him into her life, and together they built something that changed the world. They proved that love is stronger than hate, that hope is stronger than fear, that building is stronger than destroying. Every pressed flower in her journals is a testament to that truth. We honor her by continuing the work she started, by choosing love over fear, by building bridges instead of walls. They buried Vara beside Kieran in the garden, and the wildflowers that grew there became a place of pilgrimage for people from all over the region. Couples would come to pledge their love, to draw strength from the example of two people who had refused to accept that their love was impossible. Parents brought their children to teach them about the power of small kindnesses and persistent hope. Leaders came to remember that change started with individuals choosing to do differently. Dawn kept her mother's journals safe, preserving them as historical documents and family treasures. Sometimes she would open them and look at the pressed petals, each one a morning, each one a choice, each one a small act of love that had accumulated into something transformative. The earliest flowers were faded now, but they were still there, still bearing witness to what had been possible. Years became decades, and decades became generations. The story of Vara and Kieran passed into legend, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from embellishment. But the core truth remained, that an orc woman and a human man had loved each other when such love was forbidden, had built a community when such communities were thought impossible, had changed the world through the simple act of choosing each other every single day. And every spring, when the wildflowers bloomed across the borderlands, people remembered. They remembered the flowers left on a windowsill at dawn, the petals pressed carefully into journals, the love that had refused to be denied. They remembered that change was possible, that bridges could be built, that the world could be made better by those brave enough to try. The cottage where it all began was preserved as a monument, and on the windowsill, someone always placed fresh wildflowers, maintaining the tradition that Kieran had started so long ago. Visitors would stand there and imagine that first morning when Vara had found the flowers and thought them an accident, not knowing they were the beginning of everything. They would think about how small gestures could have large consequences, how consistent kindness could transform lives, how love could indeed conquer all if given the chance. In Bridgewood and the other settlements that had followed its model, children of mixed heritage grew up knowing they belonged, that they were not aberrations but bridges, living proof that the old divisions were not inevitable. They learned the story of Vara and Kieran as foundational history, the tale of how their world had been made possible. And some of them started their own traditions, their own ways of showing love across difference, their own methods of building rather than destroying. The journals themselves, carefully preserved through generations, became almost sacred texts. People would request to see them on significant occasions, to touch the pages that Vara had touched, to see the flowers that Kieran had gathered. Each pressed petal was a piece of history, a fragment of the love story that had changed everything. Scholars studied them, poets wrote about them, artists created works inspired by them. But more than any scholarly analysis or artistic interpretation, the journals were simply what they had always been, a record of love. Each flower Kieran had gathered in the pre-dawn darkness, each petal Vara had carefully pressed and preserved, was an act of devotion. Together, they formed a testament to the power of choosing love every single day, of maintaining hope even when circumstances seemed hopeless, of building something beautiful in a world that often preferred destruction. The legacy of those pressed flowers extended far beyond Bridgewood or even the borderlands. As the mixed communities prospered and spread, as humans and orcs learned to live together peacefully, as the old hatreds slowly faded, people pointed to Vara and Kieran as proof that change was possible. Their story became a touchstone, a reminder that individuals could make a difference, that love could overcome prejudice, that a better world was worth fighting for. And so the wildflowers continued to bloom each spring, carpeting the borderlands in color. And people continued to gather them, to give them to those they loved, to press them into journals and books and hearts. They continued to tell the story of the orc woman who pressed petals and the human man who brought them, who together had loved each other into creating a new world. And in that telling and retelling, in that gathering and pressing, in that persistent choice to honor love over fear, Vara and Kieran's legacy lived on, as fresh and vital as the first flower ever left on that stone windowsill at dawn.